Wonderful. So it is 12:01, so let's get going. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We are so grateful to have wonderful panelists to be with us. And so welcome to the third and final session of YH Next Gen's education series, Empowering the Next Generation of Caregivers. And if you didn't tune into our first two sessions, not to worry, the recordings are available on the yhnextgen.com website. And if you did tune in, thank you very much for attending. And to give a quick recap, in the first session, we had a panel discussion on how to start talking to your family about senior care and how to start envisioning it. And the second session, we covered what services are available for your loved ones. And now that you've started to explore the options available in our Canadian healthcare system, today we are going to start talking about supporting you as a caregiver as you support your loved ones. And this topic also coincides with September being World Alzheimer's Month and wearing purple if you can. So I tried my best today wearing purple. Purple is a significant color because it combines the colors of red and blue. And the color red represents passion and energy, while the color blue extends a sense of stability and calmness. And the Alzheimer's disease can feel grueling for both the patients and the caretakers. So it does take a unique combination of endurance and steadfastness, which the color purple really embodies. So we're going to have a robust conversation today with our panelists on specific challenges of being a caregiver, but especially if you're a caregiver of a loved one suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia. So my name is Candice J, and I'm a volunteer and one of the founding members of YH Next Gen. And in my day job, I work with high net worth families on their wealth management and go through a lot of these practical conversations as well. So I am very interested in talking with these experts today. YH Next Gen is a community that was created just this year with a few specific goals in mind. Number one is to provide opportunities for Next Gens to give back to our loved ones and to the broader community. Number two is to provide Next Gens with education and support as they navigate the present time or future roles of being a caregiver. And number three is to celebrate and support Yihong. And if you're unfamiliar with Yihong, Yihong is a nonprofit senior care organization based in the GTA. And it specializes in providing culturally and linguistically appropriate care to seniors of a variety of Asian backgrounds, including Chinese, South Asian, Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Filipino backgrounds. And that's important, especially when it comes to your culture's comfort foods in senior care. So I am proud to highlight that Yihong has recently set the largest fundraising goal in history of the Chinese Canadian community. And it's a goal of raising $80 million to double its existing long-term care capacity and building 800 more beds across 3 new centers. And this will reduce Yihong's waitlists very meaningfully, which can take as long as 10 years, a huge contrast to the provincial average of 152 days. So reach out to us if you want to learn more about how you can support the campaign or get involved with YH Next Gen. And you can find our passionate group of volunteers through the Next Gen email address on our website. Now, a few housekeeping items before we begin. I wanted to invite you all to ask our panelists questions by using the chat window in the bottom of your screen. And you can submit your own questions anonymously or to everyone, and can direct it to the individual panelists as well. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our 3 incredible speakers. Thank you to Dr. Kenneth Lam, Jeanette Bach, and Ernest Wu for joining us today. Dr. Kenneth Lam is a geriatrician and assistant professor at the Division of Geriatrics at the University of California. He's completed his residency in geriatric medicine fellowship at the University of Toronto. And his primary research and work interests investigate the experience of disability in late life and how we can measure and quantify supports provided in home or in a nursing home. He's also grateful for the services provided by Yihong, as his grandfather lived in a Yihong-affiliated Villa Elegance before moving to a long-term care at Mangzhou. Welcome, Kenneth. Jeanette Bach is the Associate Director of Client Services with Home Care Assistance. She is a focused executive with more than 25 years of award-winning customer service and sales experience. She has a background of working in the hospitality industry and with a large shopping center developer, seniors retirement living, and with a geriatric care management team. And although Jeanette enjoyed a varied career in the shopping center industry, she looked at a change when her own father went into a healthcare crisis. So Jeanette has personal experience there, and she experienced the confusion and emotional turmoil that many of the families that she works with suffer. And it really ignited a passion in her to help others going forward in similar experiences. And last but not least, Ernest Wu is a junior partner at Shirley Yee Professional Corporation. He practices as an estate, real estate, and commercial lawyer. And he helps his clients navigate the legal and emotional complexities of estate planning and hopes to educate more families on the importance of proactive planning. And I am there with you, Ernest. He assists families with drafting wills and powers of attorneys, ensuring that they will be well prepared to face decisions regarding a loved one's end-of-life care and assets. He's also very proud to serve on the YH Next Gen committee and a fellow volunteer with us. So let's start with some background questions relating to Alzheimer's and dementia. Welcome to the three of you. We are so lucky to have you today. And the first question, I did want to direct it to Dr. Lam. Can you explain what is Alzheimer's and dementia, and how are they different, and how do you diagnose it?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Candice. There's actually a lot of contention that appeared in the last 2 years about Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's dementia, and Alzheimer's disease. And there's a little bit of nuance to it, but the contention basically goes as follows. Dementia is a syndrome, and a syndrome in medicine is basically a cluster of signs and symptoms. And it's defined by the fact that your brain is not working as well as it used to. So on objective and subjective terms, your brain function is not as good as it used to be. And you also have to have demonstrated inability to function. And so there's certain domains that we look at on a regular basis, things that you need to do in your daily life, things like managing your medications, managing your finances or your banking, getting groceries, and later on things like bathing or toileting or getting dressed. So you have to have a problem with your memory or cognition to a point where you cannot where one of your functions you cannot do on your own anymore. And that is the syndrome of dementia. That said, that's different from the diseases that cause dementia, and there's several diseases that cause dementia, the most prominent and prevalent of which is Alzheimer's disease. And so Alzheimer's disease is essentially a problem where your brain is basically being chewed up by amyloid plaque. And that is because of the invasion of that plaque, your brain doesn't work as well as before. And that's what causes the so-called dementia syndrome. And so really the job from a geriatric or neurologist's perspective is to look at the signs and symptoms that are occurring and trying to map that probabilistically to what the underlying disease is likely, or what sort of plaque is appearing in the brain, and also where it might be appearing in the brain. But that's the formal distinction between Alzheimer's dementia versus Alzheimer's disease.
Thank you, Dr. Lam. Don't go on mute just yet. One follow-up question to that is, how common is it? And given what you've seen in your medical practice?
Yeah, it's very common, and that's what's very confusing. So oftentimes the cognitive changes that come with aging get mistaken to be aging. And the reason why is because, by the age of 65 and older, the prevalence of Alzheimer's dementia is about 5%. Alzheimer's dementia makes up about half of dementias. So the overall prevalence of dementia is probably around 10% for everyone over the age of 65. But by the time you hit 85, the likelihood of having dementia is probably up around 50%. Now, it depends on how you look at it, right? If it's happening to half of the population, you can understand why that would be very easy to mistake for normal aging. At the same time, if it doesn't happen to everyone, it can't be normal aging, because if it's just years alone, you can hit 85 without developing that sort of cognitive impairment. It must just be a very prevalent and common disease. So that's the common challenge, is that, sifting out what it is. It's not normal. Like basically the other way to put it is that 50% of people make it to the age of 85 without problems in their memory or thinking that get in the way of any function whatsoever. So if you are noticing a change in someone's ability to care for yourself, there's a problem.
Thank you, Dr. Lam. And I want to move it to Jeanette now. Given with your work and working with seniors, what are some of the early symptoms and signs of dementia that families start noticing? I think a lot of us joke that we can't remember names or what we ate for breakfast, a lot of things like that, but that's, maybe not something good to joke about, but, what is something beyond that that people can look out for?
Well, first off, I'd like to just sort of say that not everyone is going to experience the same types of symptoms. It will vary, substantially between one person and another. But, everybody is familiar with memory loss. And those are the things we key into, just as you said, Candice. But there's more than just that. I mean, when we look at memory loss, we look at, forgetting important dates and forgetting the same, like asking for the same information over and over again. There's, trouble understanding visual and spatial relationships. So difficulty in reading, difficulty judging distances, determining color and contrast. So that's one other area. There's also problems in solving problems. So when their ability has been impaired to follow a plan with numbers, so a recipe, doing budgets, that sort of thing starts to become a bigger issue. Also, difficulty just in completing familiar tasks. So even making a coffee or a tea, it's the process that they're forgetting, and you start to recognize that they're having difficulty. They may put the kettle on and walk away, forget the next step, that sort of thing. Of course, confusion of time and place, not knowing what month it is, what year it is, that sort of thing. And just getting confused in that area. Maybe problems in speaking and or writing. So they forget their words, they use sentences inappropriately, or things, they use words inappropriately. They may start to use, the word pain for okay. And I only use that example because we did have a client that way. And it was very confusing for all of us. Things like they start to misplace items, and then there's some paranoia that comes into play with that, because they think that other people are moving or taking their items because they can't find them. Decreased or poor judgment. So giving money to strangers is, concerning. And, they're paying less attention to hygiene or proper clothing options. We have one client that before the caregiver gets there in the morning, they have to undress and redress because she's put so many layers on, like couple of pairs of underwear or undergarments and things like that. Withdrawal from work and social activities is another one, because they're not feeling comfortable with the changes that are happening and they're losing their self-confidence. And also changes in mood and personality is another one. That's just some of them, my top 10.
Oh, so many of them. And I would also add, in my line of work, working with families, it's the financial side of it. If things are out of the normal picture, there's something that you should be worried about as a family member, just to look into. But given that, you may not see your loved one all the time, so you may not see the progression of these changes. Jeanette, like, what are some of the things that really, maybe, if you see your loved one once a week, and, how do you distinguish between just forgetting something versus actually becoming a serious issue?
I just see Dr. Lamb wants to say something. So
yeah, I might chime in, because that's probably something that crosses my desk more often than Jeanette's, and that I'm the one responsible for making a diagnosis. I'll clarify some of Jeanette's points, that, obviously the presentation of dementia can change from person to person. And the thinking there is that your brain is an organ that actually has various geographies and areas that are responsible for different things. We talk most often of dementia being a memory problem, because that's the one that I think memory is the brain function that people recognize most saliently, but that's not the only thing that your brain does. Your brain is obviously responsible for putting your sentences together, for making executive decisions where you're trying to weigh different consequences against one another, and all sorts of other things. And where the plaque deposits tells you where the brain is affected. And you can't always predict where the disease will start occurring first. But if it goes in a certain place, it may affect a different function first. That said, when you study how people's function tends to deteriorate, the functions that get impaired first in people with cognitive impairment are in finances and groceries. Those are the ones that appear first in general. That's not everyone. Some people it's speech first, and some people it's different places, different problems. But driving, groceries, finances are where you see the problem. And, you have to differentiate that from normal aging. I mean, if you have a pandemic and all of a sudden shopping is all online, that impairment in that function is not considered dementia because the world moved on without you. And your ability to learn things is impaired as you get older, but your ability to do old tasks should not be impaired. So I always think about dementia. I try to explain to patients, dementia is where the stuff that you had in your brain, it's not that it's hard to retrieve, it starts to go missing. It starts to fall away. So, someone who could use an iPhone before, who can now no longer use an iPhone, that is weird. But if they could never use an iPhone, it doesn't matter as much to me. So if you're seeing your parent or a loved one, once weekly or once monthly, that's what you're looking for, deteriorations in what they used to be able to do. And it has to be something that they could have done in the past. And then the one caveat is that there is a stuttering period that we call sort of mild cognitive impairment, where it's not clear that they can no longer do a certain function, but you're like a little bit worried about them. So it's not black and white. There is a holding ground, or this sort of like limbo or purgatory that we call mild cognitive impairment, where you'd leave them alone on their own and they're kind of like not losing money actively, but you're kind of worried about them. That is its own category as well.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. That's an interesting perspective, like being on the medical side of it as well. But Jenna, coming back to you, when do loved ones get involved? Like, when should they start interjecting and having these conversations?
Well, I'm a proponent of getting involved early and recognizing it and understanding, where it can go, because the best laid plans are the best. So having those conversations, but also being really respectful of your parents as well, because you're maybe noticing things. You kind of want to ask them if they need additional help with maybe their budgeting. And in my case, with my father was really all about his budget spreadsheet. And when I started to notice he was forgetting his passwords, which he never did before, and then he would look at his budget, but not really understand what it meant, and kept asking me questions about his budgets. That's when the red flags. And at that time, I knew nothing. And so I see a lot when they're starting to have difficulty, as Dr. Lamb said, with numbers and with groceries, for sure, getting in a grocery store and forgetting what you went there for, going home, that sort of thing. My father also had challenges driving. So I think that one is also, and I have my own comments about, kids that allow their parents to keep driving when they know there's no way they should be, because they're concerned about what will happen when their parents are relying on other people, i.e. themselves, for driving them around now. So those are, I would say, the sooner the better. The sooner the better, for sure.
And that seems to correspond with, them starting to become a caregiver and the challenges that arise there. And we'll touch on that definitely a little further along. So back to you, Dr. Lamb, like, how does someone actually die of dementia? Like, and what are the possible treatments that are out there? Maybe tell us a little bit more on that side to give us a rounded background.
Yeah. I think that's a picture that people often, it doesn't get described even by neurologists who make the diagnosis. So dementia kills people. The cause of death in dementia, like in the last month of life, is almost always an infection. So it's fever with hospitalization. And the idea here is that if you let most forms of dementia take their inevitable course, which is progressive deterioration, you end up to a point where you can't think, so your higher level brain functions have become impaired, and then it eventually gets down into sort of issues with movement and your body function. When the dementia or brain function is deteriorated to a point where you can't swallow effectively, that's when you're at risk of choking on things. When you choke on things, food or saliva goes down the wrong windpipe. That means bacteria end up in the lungs. That's the cause of fever. So it's pneumonia or urinary tract infection because you remain immobile. And then the event that happens is that they become very confused. They get a fever, they go into the hospital. And then at that point, they're so frail that they sort of succumb to everything. The data around how long it takes to die of dementia from diagnosis is mixed. Some records say it's like 4 to 6 years, but people can live for up to 20. And so, if you talk to people, there's a lot of debate around it. And the reason why it gets complex is because dementia happens in older people, and older people, just from time alone, it's more likely that you don't have just dementia, but you have other diseases that may potentially be limiting your life. And so, you can't really talk. My personal opinion is that, it'd be nice to talk about dementia in isolation, but my practice is never dealing with dementia in isolation. It's dealing with dementia in the context of everything else. And so you can imagine from a research standpoint, when you start dealing with older people rather than pure dementia, like young onset Alzheimer's, pure just Alzheimer's dementia, the research gets very, very complicated because it's very hard to unpack everything that's happening all at once.
Thank you very much. And I see that the Q&A is starting to heat up. So Maureen asked if they wanted, if a body function degeneration is inevitable with Alzheimer's. And I know, Dr. Lam, you already answered that, but maybe share with the rest of the audience verbally your answer there.
Sure. So I commented, the question was whether or not bodily function degeneration is inevitable with Alzheimer's. I would start by saying there are some dementia syndromes that are both a motor problem as well as a cognition problem. So a thinking problem and a movement problem, and they come together, and the movement problems come early. Alzheimer's dementia is classically not that picture. It's a cognition problem first, but there are good studies showing that cognitive impairment often comes with movement impairment. I think to get to the point, though, as to what Maureen is probably asking, it is not inevitable in all cases, but I would find it uncommon for someone to make it 10 years with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia and still have no motion problems. Whether that's because they fell and broke something because they had a minor motor problem and then it becomes a major motor problem, or just because the degeneration in the brain is starting to hit the motor centers.
Thank you. And we'll come to the next questions in a little bit. So for you, Jeanette, what do you have to do as a caregiver? What are your responsibilities? And what should you know when you start to prepare for care with a parent or loved one with dementia?
Well, for one, I always tell people this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. As Dr. Lam has indicated, it can be 10 plus years. I've seen actually somebody 15 years living with Alzheimer's, and so you really have to be prepared for the long haul. And for my father, he had Parkinson's with Lewy body dementia, what I consider the cruelest dementia, quite honestly, because it's fraught with hallucinations and things like that. So. But you have to, I don't know. I think you have to get on this early. You have to learn what you can learn and look for support groups and things like that, and understand what you're getting into. So prepare yourself that it's going to be a marathon. You can't go at this alone. You need support. You're going to look for community groups where Alzheimer's Society is my go-to, quite honestly, if somebody has dementia or they're the caregiver, because they provide a lot of support and get you prepared initially when that first diagnosis comes. So that would be the first place. And look to family and friends to help in the initial stages, to support, running by for quick visits and things like that. I go back to the engagement, so important. Just because don't have your parents sitting in front of the TV. That's probably the worst thing that you can do. Get them out doing activities. Focus on their abilities and let them enjoy those abilities for as long as they can and promote those abilities. I get distressed when I start to see people saying, oh, no, she can't do that anymore. No, she can't do that anymore. If you start to take those things away from them early, then they're going to likely decline faster. And that's what I have seen. So I'm about be respectful because you have to put yourself in their position. How would you feel if this was happening? It's frightening. it's terrifying when all of a sudden you're starting to realize that your day to day is becoming more and more challenging and things are slipping through the cracks. So be respectful and be empathetic to what they're going through, and put yourself in their position. And how would you like to be treated? So I start from there. You want to have those conversations though with them. You want to have those conversations with them, being respectful and asking them how you can help support them. Keep them involved in the conversations. I had one client who kept saying to his mother when I was there, "You're demented." Oh my gosh, no. Be respectful. What they're going through is beyond their control. And, you help support them. Make sure that their nutrition is good. Make sure they're getting out for physical activity, whether you're taking them for walks or others are. Make sure that they are trying to do as much of their day-to-day life as they possibly can for as long as they can. Build up their self-esteem, tell them it's okay, mom, it's all right. You've got to help support them in every way you possibly can. Those for sure.
I love
then
the
there's
respectful. Sorry. I love when you said be respectful, because I've seen a lot of situations where the frustration kicks in and the respect goes out the window. And it's terrible. It creates even worser dynamics within the family. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, there's a few other things though, Candice, I would say, like speak in shorter sentences, speak slowly, because they maybe not be grasping the ideas and the information that you're providing to them. So you got to think about communicating a little differently than them. Don't be condescending. I see that a lot, and that just, so there's a couple of others.
Thank you. Ernest, over to you now to talk a little bit more on powers of attorneys. It's also inevitable that's your role as a caregiver to start having those types of responsibilities. So tell us a little bit more about what a power of attorney is. When do you need to update it, and your role as a lawyer in those types of conversations?
So first of all, powers of attorney, they have different names in each province. So I'm going to focus on the ones in Ontario. So generally, a power of attorney is a legal document wherein you can appoint a substitute decision maker to make decisions on your finances and property or on your personal care. These are very important documents, as you can see from our conversation earlier from Jeanette and Dr. Lam. Without these documents, when your loved ones get older and their memory or their capacity starts to deteriorate, they may not be able to fulfill certain obligations, and their wishes in a medical setting may not be performed. So these are very important documents to have done early. And I want to stress that. Have these documents done early and have these conversations early. It's never too early to have these documents done, because these documents have many effects which are helpful even before early onset dementia or Alzheimer's. For example, if you had a power of attorney for property, someone could help you close a real estate transaction or access your bank account if you fall ill or be injured in the hospital. So these are documents that I think are valuable at any stage of life. In particular, I want to mention that there's two types of powers of attorney. So first, there's a power of attorney for property. And this is a power of attorney wherein you can appoint a substitute decision maker to have the authority to make decisions on behalf of all your assets. So they can access your bank account, they can transfer title to your property, and anything related to that. And the second one is the personal care power of attorney. So this one, it allows authority for your substitute decision maker to make decisions and communicate with healthcare professionals to decide on long-term healthcare facilities where you'll be staying. And you can even include wishes and directives of how and what treatments you want to be given to you at end of life. In terms of whether you need a lawyer, so I understand that there is sometimes difficult to find a lawyer, or loved one may find it uncomfortable to see a lawyer. And I want to reinforce that you do not need a lawyer to complete a power of attorney. So for example, on ontario.ca, there are generated forms where you can print out and actually prepare your own powers of attorney. There are a few things I do want to emphasize to ensure that your power of attorney is valid is A, you need 2 witnesses, both of which must be over 18. And there's a few requirements for these witnesses. They cannot be the attorney themselves or the attorney's spouse, and it cannot be your own family members. So if you do decide not to go ahead with a lawyer, please remember to ensure that you have the correct witnesses, or the powers of attorney will not be valid and cannot be used. That being said, due to all the complexities that could occur, I would highly recommend a lawyer. For example, powers of attorney are such powerful documents. It is important to have safeguards in place for these. For example, you might want to put an expiry date. You may want to put triggering events such as your personal power of attorney for property will only, your power of attorney for property will only be effective upon an assessment of mental incapacity, or discussing physical safeguards. For example, am I going to place it in a safety deposit box? Am I going to put it in a fire safe box in my home? So it's good to consult a lawyer just to have these conversations and help guide your loved ones on how to appropriately plan and secure these powers of attorney.
And I would suggest letting your powers of attorneys know that they are the power of attorney, because sometimes people don't really realize it, or they get confused if there's a few kids. What about having, could you have 2 kids be your power of attorney for health and for financials as well? Like, so is there a limit to that, or how do you recommend people work with their families if they have multiple children or other people they want to help out?
Yes. So just to echo you, yes, it's very important to make sure your power of attorney is willing to be your substitute decision maker. If they're not willing to do it in the first place, then that power of attorney will become ineffective regardless. Another important point I want to bring up is you should only prepare a power of attorney and appoint the substitute decision maker if you trust them. If you have any concerns and you have any doubts that they will carry out your wishes, I do not recommend doing so. But going back to your question, with respect to appointing multiple substitute decision makers, that's definitely possible. However, I generally recommend that you would appoint an initial substitute decision maker, and then you would appoint a substitute decision maker. And the reason being is that if you have 2 children, for example, and they both show up to the hospital with your personal care power of attorney, and they have different ideas of how you should be treated, without the authority for one person to make a decision over the other, this could delay a procedure, and this can make it very difficult for the medical professional there to make a decision. So generally, yes, you can put multiple people, but please ensure that there is somebody who can make the final decision, or ensure that your children are very clear on your intentions and your wishes so that they will, work together to provide the best care possible.
Thank you, Ernest. And the chat, I'm so happy to see so many questions coming through. Dr. Lamb's answered a few, but we'll come back to them live as well. And a few power of attorneys, one on there as well. So Jeanette, I wanted to, I see you unmuted as well, but I wanted to bring it back to also certain situations where the caregivers themselves are so run down from taking care of their loved ones, and to stress that they have their powers of attorneys in order. Like, have you seen that happen a lot in your families?
Absolutely. I would say 9 times out of 10, well, maybe not 9 times out of 10, but a high degree, we have caregivers that are so stressed out looking for their loved one for such a long period of time that they end up the ones that going down. So when I say going down, they have a heart attack, they have a stroke, because they're dealing with the day-to-day pressures. And I'm talking about someone's spouse most often, not the adult child. But when you have, parents living together, and one has, advanced dementia, and the other one is okay, may have some mobility issues, that person gets very overwhelmed very quickly. They're not sleeping, they're stressed out with being basically on 24/7. It's almost like an advanced dementia. It's almost like looking after a 2-year-old. You have to be really hyper aware of everything that's happening. So what I see most is just stress. And then when stress kicks in, they have a hard time making decisions. They get completely overwhelmed. They're not sleeping. And so their health goes down quickly. So I always say to people, don't let it get to that. I go back to that whole thing. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So get those supports in place. Put your hand up early so that you monitor the amount that you're doing. Get in extra help, get a housekeeper in initially. Maybe then you want some 4 hours worth of care just to take a break to go to sleep. Oftentimes those, if those are suffering with, like my father, for instance, he had Lewy body. So he was hallucinating at night and had difficulty sleeping. My mother didn't sleep, and her blood pressure went crazy. And so that then resulted me having to be in the place, and I was working full time. So a lot of times you see adult children supporting one parent, they're working full time, they're managing this, and it can be anywhere between 20, 40 hours a week of additional being on. And now we've got the sandwich generation where many people are in the situation where they have their kids at home still, and they're looking after their parents. So, something's going to give. So again, get supports in, get them early. And sometimes you're going to make those hard decisions of looking to place mom or dad into a private, one of your communities, that have maybe memory living, those types of things. And you shouldn't feel guilty about that. They're going to get great care in those places. And then you can become their daughter again and not be, because what happens is that stress, and then you get resentful, and you're undergoing all of these things, and why is this happening to me? And people, I've seen it happen where they take it out then on their parent that has Alzheimer's and really has no control over some of the behaviors that they have, right? So it's really about, I always say to people, if you can just be their daughter, that's often what they want, is just the daughter. And it's a difficult balance being caregiver and a daughter, or husband or wife and caregiver. So definitely. I'm sorry, Candice, I just wanted to make one comment. I've been involved in many situations with powers of attorney, and I have seen some really horrible things happen. And so to Ernest's point, if you don't set your powers of attorney up properly in the very beginning, and in such a way, you've got to be cognizant of the dynamics in a family. I have seen where there's been 5 powers of attorney and there's majority rules. Are you kidding me? Like, nuts. I have seen where, the son is the power of attorney for property and the daughter is the power of attorney for personal care, and they don't talk. And she's saying they need help, and he's saying, sorry, you can't have the money. I'm preserving the wealth for the next generation. And so be really careful when you're putting those powers of attorney together, and be realistic about your family dynamics. That would be my best advice.
There's a lot of tension in a lot of families. So both you and Ernest have said that, choose wisely and carefully, and it can change too. So, if you're starting to see signs that maybe they're not the best power of attorney for you, I don't hesitate to change it. But Jenna, I loved your tip on, even getting a few hours of help per week to start off, like start small, get the 4 hours for sleep, for doing something for yourself. Because that's where caregivers really wear down.
And people often wait till they're in real crisis. And if they were to get that extra care in early, then they're, again, marathon versus sprint. They're taking their breaks. They're needing, and they're taking care of themselves. It's that old adage as well. The pilot, you get on a plane and they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your child. Same idea, because if you go down, the house of cards fall, and then you're in true crisis. So.
Thank you, Jeanette. Ernest, there's quite a lot of buzz on power of attorneys in the Q&A. So let's turn it back there. I think people had some time to digest now. Did you have a moment to take a quick look at them? Okay, so why don't you unmute and answer some of them or all within your comments now?
So I see a first question here that POAs, can they be out of province? So definitely legally, from a legal standpoint, as long as the power of attorney has met the formalities of each province, they are valid in each other province. However, the answer isn't so simple. The reason is that just because something is legal doesn't mean that each institution is going to recognize that document. So for example, if you do a power of attorney in British Columbia, then you bring it to a bank in Toronto, which is in Ontario, they may say, well, this is out of province. We have a policy in our bank that we do not accept out of province powers of attorney. So to answer that question, yes, they are legally valid, but I would not take that as a comfort. I would highly recommend that you need to have a power of attorney done in each province, in each country where you have assets and where you may require care. There's another question of when it is too late to have a person sign the power of attorney. So generally, when we see new clients who want to draft the power of attorney, we will do a capacity assessment ourselves. And if we as lawyers feel that person does not have the capacity to give these powers to a substitute decision maker, we will not let them complete them. However, there's still things you can do. So in Canada, you can get what's called a capacity assessor. You can make an appointment to do this. And once they make a capacity assessment, then believe the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee will appoint a decision maker on your behalf. If you then want to, as a family member, want to take over that decision-making power, you can apply to the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee to do so. However, you have to understand, I think this is a very good time to remind people that you should do these powers of attorney early. So for example, capacity assessors. In Ontario, from my memory, right now, if you need a language, there's a language barrier and the person can only be assessed in Cantonese or Mandarin, for example. There's only 2 assessors in Ontario that can do this. And there's only 2 assessors for all the people we have here. It could be a long waiting list. Additionally, once the decision-making power is given to the Office of the Public Guardian, you have to apply and create this whole management plan of how you're going to take care of your loved one. And they may reject this application. So this is another, important time to remind everyone, get the powers of attorney done early. It could save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache and a lot of difficulty and even fees. There's a lot of fees involved in hiring a mental capacity assessor and hiring a lawyer to make these applications. So once again, I want to take this time to say, get those powers of attorney done early.
Thank you, Ernest. Yeah, and especially in the world of COVID realities that we live in now, it's changed the speed of things dramatically, taking longer. And Jeanette and Dr. Lam, bring it back to COVID and what you're seeing now out there of how dementia has progressed, or I want to say it hopefully got better, but I'm hearing it's progressed in sort of the negative way. If you have any comments on that right now to share with everyone.
Yeah, I see, I'm on the front line, so I'm getting those calls and I have seen a huge increase. I would say, well, for sure this summer, but even before that. And I say this summer because people have been moving more. People have been going back to see their parents, and they're shocked at the difference in them from a year ago. And that's where they're starting to realize, oh my gosh, like things have really changed. So being on the front lines, getting those calls from those family members, have seen a huge increase where there may have been a little bit, as I was saying earlier, of what we call mild cognitive impairment. So nothing really to be too concerned. It's just kind of like an early warning signal, to now where they're thinking their parents are not safe in their home any longer because they may be falling more, they're leaving the stove on, they're forgetting things, they're not able. And again, to your point that you made earlier, we have to do things differently with COVID. A lot of seniors weren't leaving their homes, they weren't getting the groceries. And so, it's easier for you and I to set up a grocery delivery, but that's a huge leap for many seniors, especially if they're, experiencing cognitive decline. So I in my practice, or with home care assistants, we have seen a huge increase. And recently, I've been going in and doing what we call Mind Fit to many for a number of homes that we're partners with. And I'm seeing, before maybe I would have seen maybe 10 people come out. Now I'm seeing quite a number more than that come out, because I think somewhere they're maybe concerned and they're wanting to understand, what can I do? What things can I do? What activities, what things, different engagements can I be involved in that I'm keeping my brain aware and engaged and stimulated.
Dr. Lamb, do you have any comments right now?
Yeah, I think I would go back and say, I'm from the research and medical perspective, very medical perspective, the question is like, is the plaque in that person's brain eroding further due to COVID is one question. And then the other question is, how has COVID affected people's function and independence? And I think, Jeanette is describing how COVID has affected people's function and independence, but they think it's still an outstanding question as to whether or not COVID is affecting, the plaque in people's brains. So that's the distinction. That's obviously very hard to tease apart, but.
So probably a good time to talk about then, is it better for someone with dementia to be in a home setting or a congregate living setting? Of course, every situation is different, but I'll throw it to you, Jeanette, first to answer that.
Well, I would say it depends on where they are in the journey. As I was saying earlier, the longer they can continue a normal as life as they enjoyed in the past, the better. So when somebody's starting to see a decline, I always, introduce the idea of having some caregiver come for that companionship, 3-4 times a week, to spend some time with them, to introduce that and to keep them engaged. When they get into later stages, making a move. So I've had recently, somebody that's in their early 90s. Now the person was living in their home and they want to make the change into retirement living. Then yes, go for it. But it is challenging because they're losing their memory. So making a change when they're sort of maybe a moderate dementia is a big deal, because their room is, their environment's completely different. The people around them are different. They are meeting new people. There's new routines that they have to, get familiar with. And I often get asked, when they are already in retirement living and somebody decides that they want to change them to maybe a memory living, as much as I think a memory living is a great place for them to be, there is going to be a huge adjustment period as they come down, because if they're still aware of their surroundings, it's going to be really confusing to make that move. And it really sends them on a downward spiral. So what we recommend is that, if you do have a caregiver in your home, extend that caregiver into your move into retirement living for a period of time. So at least that's familiar. They know you know them, and there's some familiarity, and you can get them engaged in this new routine. And I would say the same thing when people move from even retirement living into long-term care. I also make that, if they can have that one familiar face, it's going to make that adjustment a little bit easier on them. So hopefully that answered your question, Candice.
I think that was great, Jeanette. And I think a great movie for people who don't really understand and can put themselves in the shoes of these families and people with dementia is The Father. I think Anthony Hopkins did a wonderful job having that perspective and pretty much showing in the movie exactly what you're talking about, Jeanette.
Yeah, I personally found that really, I would say, I would just put a caveat on that. I found that watching that movie really challenging for me. So not for the faint of heart, just it depends on where you are in the journey.
Yes. Dr. Lamb, did you have a comment?
I agree with what Jeanette's saying, certainly around the management of transitions that, anecdotally, without any evidence to support it, yes, bringing this familiarity from one place to another is helpful. And that the movie The Father does depict this well, because he kind of thinks that he's still at home when he's not at home anymore. That said, I will say this is like the subject of grants that I write. I don't think we know. I think that it really varies from person to person. And I think that sometimes we see people decompensate terribly. And sometimes the transition into a home is everything that the family and the person needed. Like all of a sudden, it's just fine. In the absence of like good evidence, and like I have to come up with a strategy to think through both clinically and from a research standpoint, how do you adjudicate on something like this? And I think a lot in terms of just what are the hours being provided? So if you were to imagine, you are now a caregiver of someone with dementia, how much time are you spending caring for this person? And are you willing to spend that much? Because this isn't a decision just for the sake of the older person. It's also a decision for the sake of the person caring for them. And if at some point you're not hitting a point where this is a decision that makes sense for you, you're like, however you want to make that decision. I could be making more money at work, or this is so deleterious to my health and well-being, and I just need to offload these hours in another fashion. The decision to go into a home, to me, fundamentally is a decision to access more hours of care. And then after you think about the hours of care, you're also accessing expertise, the possibility of equipment, as well as, each hour of care that you provide may not be the best hour of care possible because you might be burnt out. So, I think about the hours, and I think of the color or the quality of those hours as well when making this decision. But from a research standpoint and from an evidence standpoint, there's nothing. Like I've read about this for the past 2 years or tried to find studies on this, and no one knows.
Thank you, Dr. Lam. And I can't believe, but the hour is coming up already. I think we can talk about this for more hours. Ernest, there's another question in the Q&A. If it's too late to assign a power of attorney, will there be a default power of attorney? And I'm wondering if this was already covered, but maybe just clarify a little bit more.
Yeah, so I kind of touched on this previously on the Public Guardian, the Office of the Public Guardian. So there is no such thing as a default power of attorney. If you do not have a power of attorney, then you will have to go through that process I previously described about hiring a capacity assessor. And then the decision-making will be given to the Office of the Public Guardian, and then you can apply to claim that substitute decision-making back. There are some decisions that can be made by healthcare professionals under the Healthcare Consent Act, which don't require the mental capacity assessment. But, I'm sure Dr. Kenneth Lam is aware of those as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And one final comment from everyone. What would you like to leave our audience with today? What is the most important point that you want to stress? And if you are already a caregiver, what are the action points that you say, do it right away? So start with you, Dr. Lam.
I think the most important thing to recognize is that this is a complex project management problem, right? That, the reality is that for medical reasons, you're entering a stage of life, if you're becoming a caregiver, where, you have to consider like who is on the team, what everyone's responsibility is, and how are we going to navigate, a lot of unknowns and uncertainty moving forward. And so I think on the one hand, I think the one message is like, consider this as a project, and the problems that cause other projects to fail happen here too. If you have people who are not necessarily in the know, or not reachable, or not interested in leading it, appointed and being the ones responsible, you end up with a host of problems. The other thing that I would say from like a personal or a relational standpoint is that I think what's helpful for people, what I would stress for caregivers to observe, is to set clear boundaries with regards to what it is that you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. Speaking as a younger Chinese person, there's a strong sense of filial piety that you're supposed to I remember my mom told me stories about like how, a good son like cut parts of his arm off to feed his mom when she was sick, because that's what it means to like love your parent. And the thing that I learned, talking with geriatric psychiatrists and stuff like that, the reality is aging in the modern era, with how we've pushed people all the way to the ages of 80, 90, and 100, creates circumstances that didn't exist when those maxims were described. And I do think that the way caregiving happens now is a new phenomenon, because like the length and duration with which you can be responsible and the commonness of it is just unprecedented. So you kind of need new strategies. And to me, the strategy is monitoring, sort of being clear with yourself, expecting things may get worse, and being clear with yourself and your siblings or other family members. What are you willing to give? And if you're not, then how do you find contingencies? Not that you have to take it all on yourself, because it's crazy. It can get crazy. So when people ask like, what's the best way forward? I'm like, it's not that. I don't think we have even a way of assessing what is the best way forward. We don't have a clear vision of that. So it's hard.
Open communication, making sure your family members, loved ones are aware is such a huge, important part. Ernest, you're unmuted, so I'll go to you next.
So yeah, following on that, I think once again, the conversation is really important. So I'm going to stress this for the third time: get those powers of attorney done early. It's never too early. Let's just put it that way. But one thing that is very important before you prepare these power of attorney is that there is a balancing act. So there's a few considerations. There's the issue of security. So making sure that you trust the people you appoint as substitute decision makers, and that they are aware that they're the substitute decision makers. Also, the dynamics of the family. We often emphasize that the caregivers should encourage, the people they're caring for to prepare these documents. But as a person who's actually giving these documents, talk to the people who you're giving these authorities to. Talk to your, children if you have multiple children. Educate them and have them understand why you decided to give the decision power to this child instead of the other. This will prevent a lot of issues later on. There's so many cases where, and Jeanette touched on that briefly, where one child, purely out of ego, will make it very difficult for the decision maker to make decisions because, for the simple reason that I should have been the one that is the decision maker, not you. I'm the one that sees mom every Sunday. You don't see them. Why does she let you make these decisions? So it's very important to navigate these family dynamics and to have an open conversation even while you're preparing the powers of attorney, because we can amend them while, at any time, we can update them at any time. So if you have these conversations constantly and openly, you can prevent a lot of much more difficult situations later on.
Thank you, Ernest. Last minute to you, Jeanette.
I would say plan, and communicate. I can't stress that enough. You have to not only communicate with your parent or the person that's going through this, but you have to communicate with your siblings about this. And interestingly enough, I have one of 3 girls in my family, and we've always been very, very close. But you see, everybody deals with things differently. And that's the human element that you don't really have control with. And you don't even know how you're going to react until you're in that situation. And so having those conversations really early, and I know they're difficult conversations, but it's well worth it. I mean, I could walk out of my house tomorrow and get hit and have a brain injury and lose my cognitive ability. So it's not about waiting. You have to have those conversations now. And just one other point as well, I've recently gone, because I see so much, I've recently gone through and put advanced healthcare directives in place along with my powers of attorney, so that my kids will understand very, very well laid out. There's a frailty scale there's a dementia scale in there, and I reference it back and forth, and I had a professional put this together. And because I see so much, I think, and I'm also in a second marriage. And that's the other area where you see a ton of breakdown in family dynamics. So if you are one of those people in a second marriage, really think about how you can pre-plan as much as possible so everybody knows your wishes and desires. And the power of attorney for your personal care is the most important person, because they will decide on how you live day to day, what you wear, what you eat, where you live, all of those things. So you better have those tough conversations with those particular individuals, but everybody, so everybody knows what you want.
Thank you, Jeanette. I love that the true colors of family members really come out when it comes to family crisis and these decision makings. And you realize you may have more skills than your siblings or not. So, but thank you so much. We're at the top of the hour. We're 1 minute over. Thank you to everyone who attended today. It is greatly appreciated for your time. And we will be sending out a survey to ask for some feedback on future YH Next Gen initiatives. And the prize for your participation in the survey is that we'll be giving out 3 Dragon raffle tickets. And if you haven't heard of the Dragon raffle before, it's an annual raffle for Yihong. And the grand prize this year is an Audi A3 sedan worth over $48,000. So anyone interested in purchasing more tickets, do so before December 13th, which is the raffle deadline. So thank you again to our panelists. Your insights, everything was so appreciative. If you want to reach out to any of them, their information is on the YH Next Gen website along with this recording. So thank you so much again for everyone attending. Have a great day and stay safe. And if you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out to people immediately. I think that's the key thing here is do it early and do it now. Thank you and take care, everyone.